Alford at the Holmes and Shaver Wood County Judicial Building, and the verdict just came in. It was just read, and they found Thomas David, House of Deegan, guilty of terroristic threats, which is going to open up the door now for people all over the country to be arrested for exercising their right to free speech. With me here is Caleb Hitt, and he is one that has been here watching this whole sequence of events. And Caleb, America suffered a serious blow today.
Yes, I believe you're right. I mean, obviously with Thomas's alleged crime of terroristic threats, I mean, there was no injured party in this case. There were actually no victims involved. And even as Heather pointed out to me before we went in to hear the verdict yesterday in the courtroom, when on the arrest warrants, the terroristic threats, the West Virginia code that he's being charged with, or terroristic threats, the word threats is not defined in the West Virginia code. And Thomas brought that up in the courtroom to the judge. And so the judge had to apparently excuse himself and go dig up some definitions somewhere. Then he came back in and told the jurors what these definitions of the threats were, but once again are not mentioned in not defined in the West Virginia code. So who knows where he actually came up with it. One other thing is that as far as the state obviously used the conference call as their evidence, and I think any time that you have, obviously he was planning on going down to Charleston and executing citizens' arrests. However, he had canceled out the whole entire event once he figured out that his group had been infiltrated by feds. And I think any time that happens, you're just basically asking for a disaster waiting to happen, just like we saw happen in Oregon, of course. But other than that, I mean, you have, and there's the prosecutor, Mr. Rogers, and also Mr. Wharton leaving there, of course. So, but as far as the idea of apparently there was no warrant issued to actually, as far as how they actually obtained the, how they even got the conference call to begin with, I don't know. But obviously this kind of opens up a bigger can of worms, because, I mean, you could have anybody sitting in their house having a discussion about government and how things are and how things need to be, talking about the Constitution versus tyranny, of course. And then, I mean, we have our smart devices with us all the time. We have their camera phones, the cameras, the microphones. They could literally be listening and watching to us at any given time. They have ears and eyes everywhere now. Not only that, but you have these fusion centers. People could have a conversation in their vehicle driving down this road. And the fusion centers, they're like replicas of cell phone towers. They steal the data from your phone. And so the powers that be can bring charges against us based on conversations that people had in private. They then go reconstruct their case, making it look like they used regular investigative tactics, bringing it to the court that way, and then bada bing, bada boom, here we have it. So, well, just like George Orwell's 1984.
It is, and what we're seeing now is not just a chipping away, but an absolute demolition of all things that we considered our constitutional rights, the things that these gentlemen inside this building were sworn to protect. Now they're being legislated from the bench away from us. Free speech died here in West Virginia today, March 18th, 2016. And the warning now goes out to all who are patriots out there, all who would say anything derogatory about the corporate government that is currently running this nation, this state, this county, and this city. there's no turning back. So people are going to wind up having to go underground whenever they want to exercise their right to free speech. They're now in the process of setting up free speech zones. Free speech zones.
Yeah, free speech is not a zone.
No, and it's not something that could be legislated, and yet we just saw it legislated away from us right here today.
And let's not forget that they're also planting people on these calls to try to coax and get people to say certain things. This is like, the FBI, that's what that whole thing is to go get everyday American people to try to get them to say certain things so that they can then nab them.
Yeah, baiting.
Yes.
I mean, obviously they can infiltrate and hijack any grassroots movement anywhere.
Oh, we have examples of them, yeah.
I mean, there really is no, in a sense, there is no underground movement because there is no underground in a way because, I mean, unless we ditch our, the spy devices, of course, and get away from it. As far as I get off the grid, so to speak.
It's all part of the network, the matrix. Everybody's plugged in, and they're asleep.
Well, it's not just our phones or even our computers in our home. We even got appliances now. I mean, we've got refrigerators, smart refrigerators, other appliances that they have the Android operating systems in there. I mean, they could be spying with those in our kitchens for our own appliances. I mean, forget about our phones.
Do you think the jury considered any of this in the verdict, which was really quick to come?
If they did, I mean, I'm sure. I like to think that at least somebody in there brought that up, of course. But I think ultimately their verdict, of course, was being based on the statutory law as defined by the court. I think that, I mean, as far as the statutory law is concerned, I mean, the way it's written, I mean, I think the whole point of this case was whether there's intent or without intent, they could still consider that to be a crime. There's no need, you don't even need to have an injured party anymore, I guess. I mean, speech itself is now a crime.
Just the words. It's only the words. And that's what we're looking at here. And one of the partners in crime in this whole endeavor is WTAP, who did cover this whole thing live stream, and I give them credit for that. But the reporting on this was libelous, it was slanderous, because they used a term that the FBI coined and then is using that to label those that they want to put away. And that term is sovereign citizen.
Well, the News and Sentinel has done the same thing in their article. I mean, obviously, Thomas has never self-proclaimed himself as a sovereign citizen. They're just saying that.
That is a bold-faced lie, is it not?
Well, yes, of course it is.
So
one other thing I noticed yesterday in there, when they was talking about this sovereign citizen term or the movement, if you will, they played the audio clippings in there, and the prosecutor asked the witness, I think it was Trooper Williams, if what he heard based on that call, if that's how he made his determination of Thomas being a quote-unquote sovereign citizen, he said yes. Well then,
but that's not what the complaint said. The complaint said he self-admitted.
Exactly.
That in itself is a lie.
Exactly.
And one of the maxims of their law is that the entire case falls on the first defect. That was a serious defect.
Well, that's a very good point, because I know Thomas then asked Trooper Williams basically the same question. He asked, using the same piece of evidence that the state was using, if that's what he determined if that's how Trooper Williams determined Thomas to be a sovereign citizen. He actually said no. He said yes to the prosecutor. He said no to Thomas the same question. And then Thomas then asked, well, was it the other filings that Trooper Williams apparently had been looking at, whether it be other audios, clippings, or documents or whatever? If he asked him if there were other files, what other files he used to determine Thomas to be a sovereign citizen, and the Williams said, I don't know. He didn't know where he got it from. He just made it up apparently. Well, as you're saying, it came from the Southern Poverty Law Center and the FBI, of course. They just throw that term on. They project that term onto him. So
we're seeing a lot of that now. Well, Caleb, appreciate you taking the time and talking to us here. Those of us who have been following this case are very disgusted, very discouraged as we watch once again rights being legislated through statutes away, rights that they are supposed to protect.
We don't have any checks and balances anymore in our supposed government.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Caleb. Dee, give me your take.
I see a process here. I'm very clear that Thomas is not going to sit down and give up. I know he will appeal this case, and through that process, there's a very good possibility that this is just a process, that this had to take place for him today so that he could continue on to appellate court, to higher courts, because this is not an easy thing to resolve. This is nationwide. This is probably in some cases worldwide, but of course we're concerned with this nation. And if Iceland can do it, we can do it. Nobody said it would be easy. So I personally am not giving up. We're going to continue to fight the good fight and see where it takes us. Because I'm very clear that there was an anointing on Thomas in that courtroom.
Thomas put forth a heroic and valiant effort. And
he amazed everyone, and people, officers that were seeing him as a crazed lunatic acquired a tremendous respect for this man as they saw how intelligent and detailed and law educated that he was. He took the right steps in the court system, and they were ignored.
he was not given proper time to defend himself.
Absolutely.
He wasn't given all the documentation
Only
that
10
the
days.
prosecution had. He roughly had 10 days in order to do this.
Well, he's got more ammunition to work with now, and he's going to have plenty of time to do it. And people believing in him that weren't believing in him before. So maybe he and we can rally the troops, because he made himself credible through this process.
One of the things that really stood out was what happened, I guess it was the day before yesterday, when it was determined that the state troopers that he had called as witnesses, and I don't know how many there were, maybe 5 or 6 of them, let him know that one of their fellow officers had fallen, and the funeral for that officer was to happen either yesterday or the day before. Thomas, understanding the importance of them attending that funeral, released them from witness duty.
And that comes from an honorable man. That comes from integrity and strong character.
That's all he's exhibited from the beginning.
Yes.
So
he has created a completely different view of him. And that's going to carry him through and forward. So all we can do is encourage anyone that hears about this and wants their rights back. This isn't going to go down quickly. This is a major undertaking to take this fraudulent system back apart. We've allowed it to build up to a kingdom, a massive kingdom, and you can't just topple that in one fell swoop. You can't do it.
And now the precedence has been set so that everybody seeing this must understand that when they start using the words takeover, when they start using the words citizens arrest of government officials, anything along those lines, it's going to be construed as a threat, and they will be coming after you. They did come after Thomas, they will come after you. Precedence has been set here today.
They don't want to hear anything about taking our rights back. They don't recognize the Constitution. So Americans need to realize that they're not under the Constitution anymore. Stop spouting that. Stop spouting that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, because it isn't.
No.
We have let that go. It's gone.
They're all imposters sitting there in positions of profit or trust throughout the land, whether they know it or not. Just like when Thomas was found guilty of issuing a threat, whether intentional or not. What is their intent?
When a circuit court judge says that your supreme law of the land is not recognized in this courtroom, how much clearer can you hear that the Constitution doesn't exist in the judicial system anymore?
And if it
this
does
isn't
not,
one courtroom. This is nationally.
if it does not, does that not also have to follow that they are all imposters? There are no legitimate elected, appointed, or hired officials anywhere in the land. And yet we continue to give them credence. Well, folks, it's a sad day, but one that we're going to have to learn from. I don't know where we go from here.
I don't know. Is it a sad day? Is this not a step in the process? It really has to go to a higher court to really stand.
But all the courts are bogus. All of the courts are frauds.
We don't have all the answers yet.
Well, that is true. We do not have all the answers, but I'm convinced personally, as one that has witnessed this time and time again, that there is no recourse within the courts
Something big
of this
had
country.
to happen for something big to come of it. And I'm convinced that the anointing that this man had on what he was doing in that courtroom was not for nothing. So I have to have a higher view of this and say this is a step in the process. Maybe it'll rally people. Maybe it will open up new doors.
Dee,
This
I
is not the
appreciate
end.
you taking the time here today. That's something we're just going to have to digest, and we shall. But again, this is Carl Alfred from YLN TV, and I'm reporting here from the Shaverwood County Judicial Building where Thomas David Deegan was today found guilty of terroristic threats.